Okay, thanks. So we have 20 minutes. I think this presentation will take about 15, which will leave us 5 or so for questions. Thanks for the intro, but in case you're wondering, my name is Michael Sena. I'm product lead at UPort. Been working on with the team for like 2 or 2.5 years now. It feels like 10. And here I'm like happy to share some updates with you and some of the new things that I've been working on. So the UPort that you might come to mind when you think of UPort, like the mobile app and the Connect and all of that, is still what the main team is working on, but I'll share some new things with you today. So this presentation is about building engaging dApps with user-centric data. And the things we'll cover are just an ecosystem overview, where are we, the state of the dApps. We'll cover what user-centric data on Ethereum means or could mean, some use cases for that, and some resources to get started. So where are we as an ecosystem? We've been talking to a lot of developers, asking them, where's your dApp? What are you building? What's most important to you? And spoiler, we heard this. I'm just trying to get users on my platform right now. Most developers couldn't even imagine a state where their platform was rich with users and they were trying to develop a rich experience. But so this chart says a lot, and like there are normal like ARG metrics and all of those things that standard VCs will tell you to look at in the traditional Web 2 sense. But what's being added here is this intent column. And so basically what you have in Web 3 is it's hard enough to reach users. You're basically using Twitter or Medium, so you're limiting your scope already. And in normal Web 2, you go right to acquisition. So it's like a user sees a link, they click it, they onboard with Facebook or something, and it's simple. But in blockchain, that intent step means a lot. It means a user needs to decide they want to use it. Then between intent and acquisition, they have to go download a wallet, acquire ETH, maybe pass KYC or AML regulation if it's a financial platform. And so the fall off between intent and acquisition is huge. And that's where we hear developers expressing this need like, okay, how can I get users and onboard them more simply? And this really explains the problem. And it's like the apps, not many apps are making it down the funnel. And those that do, which we'll cover in a sec, are for a very particular reason. And so let's look at who has users, who has volume and transaction throughput on their platform. And so I pulled this from Dapp Radar. It's pretty simplistic. I think they probably count users as Ethereum accounts that are interacting with their smart contract. However they figure the metrics, it's decentralized exchanges, games or collectibles, and casino. And so what does that actually mean? It basically says that these dApps are ones that have enabled users to make it through their funnel. And then you say why, like what is the user behavior that drives that? These dApps might have no different onboarding experience than other dApps. It's because they let people make money. And so the financial incentive is enough to overcome the user experience barriers of downloading MetaMask. Like I don't know if any of you have seen that CryptoKitties onboarding infographic or steps, and there's like 20-something steps and 3 different leave the page and come backs, and like no wonder why no one can actually onboard users. And also the browsers. And so these aren't really dApps. They're more like ways that you access Web 3. And so users need to use these in order to use dApps. And so these are the people that are sitting in that intent to acquisition gap. And so we can all, and I can even throw like UPort mobile wallet in there, and we can say these are all barriers to acquiring new users. But let's assume that the wallet providers and the browser providers, the Web3 providers, will solve some of these steps. Like we just heard Opera integrating like Web3 libraries natively. Maybe Mozilla will do it next, and I think eventually you'll see a blurring of the lines between Web 2 and Web 3 browsers, and in that time I think we'll see some of these onboarding steps being solved. Other onboarding problems like fueling transactions and acquiring ETH, I'm sure there will be other solutions to that, such as paying with a credit card or Apple Pay or fueling and meta transaction services that will exist on the network to abstract it away from users. And so, oh my God, but what about all the exciting social and community marketplaces being built? Well, none of them have traction or they haven't launched yet. And they might not have traction for various reasons. If there's a fall off between awareness and intent, maybe they don't have product market fit, or maybe they just haven't reached the right audience. But if they're not making people through the funnel, it's because there's not enough draw. So basically what I'm saying is the value proposition of decentralization alone might not be enough to push social and community apps over that barrier. Like, it's a lot to use a dApp, so why should I use a decentralized app for something that is just as good on Web 2? But what about data management? And so let's return back to this. It's like they're not making it through this funnel for these types of apps, and so how can we help them? And so I know it's hard to imagine, but once we imagine that we can acquire users without too much friction, meaning like the browser vendors and Web3 providers start working together, and that's a seamless experience, then what happens? Then what does Web3 need to take it to the next level and start to begin to compete with regular applications out in the normal world, like not with like us in this room where we're developers and end users, because like we're kind of in an echo chamber. And so it's about data. And so really, when apps think about providing engaging experiences and retaining users, it's about like delivering something that's powerful, engaging, and that people want to come back to. And so the only way you can do that is with data. And so the like decentralized nature of decentralized exchanges is a value proposition in itself. It lets you make money. But how do these apps keep you coming back? And so it's about managing the data that's generated as a user or as an Ethereum account interacts with your application. As an aside, like this is generally the model of identity that we take. It's like an attribute-based model of identity where as I interact with some other party, they give me some piece of data that is resultant from that interaction, whether that was me showing them my driver's license and they give me a digital certificate saying, we verified that you are in fact this person. Or I just like pay you $5 because I owed you $5 and then you give me a piece of data that's like 5 stars, you paid me back. Either way, there's a lot of type of application user data that's generated as you use dApps. So profile information, which is like you go to a dApp and instead of seeing OX1234, you can give it a name. Social information like your contacts, the names you apply to them, the avatars you apply to them, your social graph, your history of interactions with those other people on the network and platform, your settings, so like what's the default token currency that you want to see in the dApp, what are your language settings, etc. Defaults, preferences, so things you liked and disliked, the history of your interaction on that platform in general, and state management and cookies. So all of these things we need to take a dramatic improvement on in order to start competing in the way that we need to for Web3. And so, okay, this data is cool, but like, where do we store it, and can't we do that today? So there are 2 places really that you can store it. You can store it on a server, which might be fine for some cases. It has drawbacks. So one, it's centralized, and we're all here because we believe that that's probably bad. And in addition, web servers are siloed by dApp. There's really no way for you to share information across servers because they're designed to not do that. And local storage. And so this is sort of where you can just encrypt and store secrets in the browser by origin. And so that's fine, but it's siloed by browser. And so now you can't really create cohesive experiences across mobile and desktop. You're pretty limited in scope. And so what I've been working on and what we've been developing, and it's still pretty early stage. I'll show you like an MVP prototype that we developed, but it's called 3box. And so what is 3box? It's a Web3 library that lets developers set, get, and remove data from a user's private data store associated to their Ethereum account, thereby allowing users to collect off-chain data as they interact on Web3. Okay, so what that actually means is you have an Ethereum account with a seed. Wherever you use that Ethereum account on whichever browser or wallet you use it, you can basically access a private data store. It's like your personal data API. It uses standard Web3 personal sign to authenticate dApps to it. And so it pretty much comes compatible with every wallet provider out of the box. So how does that actually work? You can give it a quick install using npm. As you can see, there's like a couple functions that you can use. It's very basic at the moment. You can get a specific string that you're looking for that you know you added. You can get everything in there. You can set a key value pair, and you can remove a key. In the future, we'll add things like encryption and dApp sharing. And so basically, you can like encrypt a specific piece of data and pass a secret to a dApp that has specific rights to decrypt it. So you can share data across dApps in a granularly permissioned way. Right now, it's pretty basic. Like anything that my dApp saves in this library, in this user space or 3-box, then any dApp that has also been granted access to that 3-box can see that data. So the first use case we imagine for it will be like a third location for dApp developers to store data that's not local storage or a server. And in the future, it will be all about sharing data between dApps. So really, how does it work? Again, so it keeps user data synced between browsers and in the user's control. So this basically solves the problem of accessing CryptoKitties in Status, Toshi, and in MetaMask, because right now, if you set a name in one, unless they're storing it on their server, you won't be able to see it on other on other wallets. And so all of this information needs to remain synced. And 3-box is basically this interface that lets developers use this functionality. All the user needs to do is basically click approve when they're signing in. So when a user goes to a dApp, they sign a message using MetaMask, which they don't even really need to because they can just sniff the Web3 provider, which I think MetaMask is thinking about deprecating in the future. And so it will be like a request-based opt-in to share my Web3 with the dApp. And so this is a general pattern that you're seeing, and so we're going to fit right into that, where you sign in with your Web3 provider, and during that process, you can also execute a personal sign that gives that dApp access to your 3-box interface, and the data is actually managed on IPFS for now, but we're exploring other options like OrbitDB or really anything. Why are we doing this? Just to reiterate, for usability, security, interoperability, and decentralization, which is kind of hard to cover all three, or all four, sorry. So what are the use cases? And I already covered some of them, but I'll go through just in a bit more detail to make it clear. What data should I store in 3-box? You can store profiles and settings. So you have your CryptoKitties dApp, you have an avatar placeholder, you can add an image there yourself, you can give your account a name, Kitty Superstar, you can set a default currency, you can set token watch lists like in MetaMask, like all of this data that's generally about you can follow you around the web. Preferences and recommendations. You can store information about what users like and dislike, and these preferences let you actually provide them with better recommendations. So I'm using a decentralized exchange, and I've previously bought I've executed a trade on a certain type of pair a few times, and this is really the only one that I've ever used, or I've used a couple variants of that. You can start to serve people better recommendations on decentralized platforms, which actually increases liquidity because it solves the discoverability problem, solves search. dApp cookies. So basically, you have a common location where you can store state and remember past actions taken by your users. So if they're on mobile or if they're on desktop, they have the same history and experience. Platform history. This is sort of basically taking data that's already on chain, making it more available and easy to use by other apps. So you can store actions taken by users on the platform. This is just the transfer log. And this can eventually form the basis of shared reputation. Shared context. So like my crypto has the context where you can basically add tags to addresses, which you can use for names, and they store them in local storage, I think. That's cool, but you can only use it in my crypto. Here now you can save a contact list that you can use across all of your dApps. So now you onboard and you don't have the cold start problem of trying to fill up and know who the other users on that platform are because you've already interacted with them and they're yours. So here's the last slide. You can try it out. It's a new library. We've just begun developing on it. We've tested it. It works in MetaMask. It works in Status. We haven't tested it too many other places yet, but we urge you to. There's some documentation on GitHub, and that's all I have for the presentation. I'll open for questions. I think we have a few minutes.